Hi there. I don't normally do this, but drop what you're doing and immediately after this video, go and read the Vanity Fair article linked below. It is a sample chapter from a book on the TV industry by Maureen Ryan called Burn It Down. That from her, she's almost 20-year veteran of the TV critic review industry. A lot of research. She talked to a lot of people for this. Across the board, the systemic behind-the-scenes problems and the workplace culture, that it's not just, oh, it's abusive, it's incompetently abusive. When you're running things on such whim that it is affecting the show, it doesn't, it doesn't really matter if they had a good relationship or not. They don't have a working relationship. All of these petty tyrants, and that it was horrifying that you get this sense of dread, of recognition, that everything she talks about in it is stuff that happened with Benioff on Game of Thrones. If you are a fan of my channel, I want to keep this short. I don't have time to reiterate everything. I will eventually integrate this into a better video on a scale of months. That just happened today. The sample chapter is on how Lindelof ran Lost, and his co-showrunner, who is even worse, and how this utterly terrible behind-the-scenes environment. And the point of her book is she goes between different shows. I don't really think she covers Game of Thrones, but there were problems like this all over the place. So this is officially, I said this on Twitter, this is the style of behind-the-scenes reporting that we deserved for Game of Thrones but never got. That back in 2015, when we're standing around blinking and going, I see they're handing them Emmy Awards. Where is the expose on why the hell is the Sansa rape happening in TV Dorn and butchering Stannis? This isn't normal. There's a controversy going on. The New York Times is running articles on the Sansa rape stuff, and they don't do interviews anymore, and just the hype media suddenly went into high gear that they are amazing. Because Breaking Bad and Mad Men had ended and they needed a new hit. But just that, the Season 8 stuff, I was like, where were you all this time? That why did you give them a free pass? Why weren't you reporting this? What was really going on? The type of journalism I expected, that specific people let you down. Specific people who are journalists who should have done their jobs failed you. Or people pretending to be journalists who are just, this is infotainment. These are puff piece interviews. To name a few, like interviews Cogman was doing in major things, like in the run-up to Season 8, and they were just total puff pieces, and I then see the reporters go, well, Cogman is my friend. He played you. Of course he's your friend. You wanted a nice interview that no one thought to ask. And the studios embraced this mentality of the auteur showrunner who can do no wrong. The celebrity showrunner who is on a pedestal as they are essentially the star. Like, I know Sam Levinson is under a lot of criticism these days for Euphoria and Idol, that sometimes these people aren't miraculous geniuses that know everything. Or the Nolan Joy husband-wife team on Westworld. This one's about saying this is in many ways the archetypal thing that started that macro-level trend, was Lindelof, the genius showrunner on Lost. And to his credit, he did call back to her when she said she was putting this book together, said he had no real defense for the things that people said were going on, other than it was a stressful time 20 years ago, and I feel bad about it. And maybe he doesn't really, but he at least was willing to go through the motions. The other co-showrunner, Casey, he denied any of this even happened. Lindelof at least had the presence of mind to pretend that he cared, because this was, it was horrifying reading that these are things Benioff did, and this is the mentality behind the scenes that enabled someone as bad as him, that it doesn't happen in isolation. And even this chapter says that the things happening on Lost weren't unheard of. This was just, it crossed a line. This was at high levels. It was the worst of the worst. That it's a spectrum. It happens gradually. That at what point in the early seasons, when we were gradually hearing about Benioff is pranking everyone, did we gradually start thinking this is not appropriate and you're just trying to put a good spin on it? Well, seriously, I didn't know that in season 1. I embraced it. And gradually, because I didn't have the right information, they were actively hiding it from us. So the big difference is that despite everything, Lindelof knows how to run a TV show, and Benioff is a con man. That not only is he getting away, even a genius writer getting away with stuff like this would be cause for controversy. Benioff isn't even a genius writer, he's just some idiot pretending to be one. It's like some effing dark comedy movie where someone just pretending, one of those college things where the guy pretending to be the millionaire's son as a con man on his word alone, everyone lets him get away with everything because they think he's rich. And he isn't even rich, he's faking it. The amount of stuff Benioff got away with by pretending to be the next Lindelof. Well, the big things I recognize, again, it would take me so long to go over this. This is one of those articles I will refer back to on a scale of years. I need to get this book. It comes out next week. There was a really toxic culture in general behind the scenes, even when people were doing what they were supposed to be doing. Just this constant casual, they openly say it was like high school hazing. They did it for no reason, and Benioff did this a lot. Benioff has been in hazing in college. Okay, there's an article where I read once where he said he ate human shit once as part of his hazing process at Dartmouth, and after that he felt they really were accepting to him in the fraternity. And I don't think he's even being malicious when he does that. That's how he befriends people, is, well, we're messing around, I prank people. And that's his spin on it. For all I know, it was just plain toxic, because what they're talking about here isn't even hazing, it's just mean. There was a lot of the articles talking about pervasive racism, and even points out someone tried to defend, well, we weren't racist, we were just bullying. That's often what racism is, that you picked something obvious, that you could mock a black actor, they mocked someone who adopted a Chinese baby, other stuff with the cast, and if one of these cast members was like disabled or something, like a deaf actor or character dwarfism like Peter Dinklage, they'd be making fun of something obvious. That's all it really is. That they're picking at weaknesses. And again, they describe it as it's like a middle school thing where for no reason at all, they needed to break everyone down around them. And that horrifying recognition that they managed to convince their hangers-on to join in on it and reinforce it and treat it as normal because they desperately wanted to be part of the in crowd. So it was like this bubble of reality where this was normal. Where people were, and it feeds that, it feeds a meagerness in other people around you that leads to things like on mocking when characters or people suffer misfortune, that the Sansa rape actually had, the entire scene had a title in the script. Script scenes have titles, I didn't know that. It's titled sarcastically, Romance Dies. And it's just this meanness and cynicism at the world that they fed into this. And then they have the temerity to make those bullshit behind-the-scenes videos where we're all a bunch of happy friends goofing off. It's like Amazon's The Boys behind the scenes. And then the thing where the PR company comes out and they have everyone say how friendly they are. So it was like that on Lost a lot. Just this pervasive, and you've seen this in shows, the cursing, the hazing, and I can even get through that. I want to read off the exact quote here just because I have it up. I'm not really editing this. This is just an advanced video I threw up. That the actor, Perrineau, you don't question the people in charge. They had no oversight whatsoever. Like Benioff with HBO, the network gave them utterly free reign. And it reminds me of the effing Milgram experiment. That isn't that the Milgram psychology experiment where you shock someone in the prison. No, that's a Stanford prison experiment. It's different from the Milgram experiment. But the moral of that experiment was actually that there were many people who would not harm someone else even when there were no consequences, is the true moral of the Milgram experiment. But the takeaway people have is that some people with no oversight will abuse their power just because they have nothing societally can ever happen to them. And it reaches a point where it becomes self-destructive. I mean, like Book Cersei thinks she's all-powerful in Book 4, Most of her problems are of her own making because she thinks she's invincible. So at a certain point, it's self-defeating, but just reading off, and these are writers that worked with Lindelof and Hughes. They were in the room. And this is like towards the end of season 2. This show ran 6 years. Towards the end of season 2, all of the original writers are gone except the showrunner. The behind the scenes, they hated the tailies with a passion for some reason. So Rodriguez had to go, and they had to demean them, that they could be vindictive at will. And on top of that, I'm just reading this off here, there's this, that in-group mentality, this coterie of people who find it amusing if a comment or joke was offensive. And everything is said with a sort of sarcastic, this whole thing is fun. It's not just that they're saying an insult. Part of the insult is that the insult doesn't matter. That there's a difference between walking up and go, hey, ugly, and then a fight breaks out versus, hey, he sure is ugly, laughter, ha-ha, well, that was normal, now let's get to work. Normalizing it is part of the insult. That they aren't treating it like a big deal isn't because, oh, well, that's just how we talk. The flippancy is part of the insult, that you are weaving it into everyday life. So that sarcasm, that you are under so much stress and so many things happening that you need to taunt other people just for nothing and then act like what you're doing is normal. So the quote here, everyone had this sort of sarcastic, the whole thing is funny to me, detached, the word I'm looking for is desensitized. It is as if they were actively trying to desensitize people from what they were doing, just as a workplace environment. And again, point of her book is this didn't just happen on Lost, it happened everywhere. But this was one of the worst examples. I mean, relative to other shows, even other people thought this was a bit much. And it crosses over that whole corporate mentality, the corporate room. Multiple people said this sensibility was a cover for bullying or inappropriate remarks of all kinds, and laughing at and adding to that kind of commentary was how you got to be part of the group. That was the terms of belonging. And that hit me so hard, as that's the kind of mentality they encourage there. Circling around, if you've ever seen HBO's Succession, just how petty and mean they are, the Roy family, and the hangers-on who want to be like them start copying how mean and flippant they are. It's not just that they're vindictive, oh, I'm Mr. Burns, I can swat you like a fly. They will stand back as other people starve and lose their jobs and think it's funny and tell a joke at their expense. Because is this how they live? Why do they feel that need to not just treat it as this is someone I'm hurting, but the funniness is how desensitized I am. So that's just part one, that it was and this was just in general, even when people weren't doing things that pissed off the showrunners. There's 3 big things to talk about in this video, and I'm doing this as one big rant unedited. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this under 20 minutes. The bigger thing was when the actor playing Mr. Echo wanted to leave the show. He got like a movie role or something. It says in the article, this happens all the time. Sometimes cast members have to leave. He wasn't even a core cast member. So, I mean, he was a new, the tailing one. So, okay, maybe you could write him out somehow. As opposed to, like, we can't just write out the lock actor really quickly without upsetting some things. And Mr. Echo, that actor, he was the gang leader in the Oz prison drama on HBO. He was the one with that cool hat. And later he was on Game of Thrones, actually, about 2015. Season 5, he was the pirate slaver who captures Tyrion and Jorah. So he's a relatively well-known actor, but even going into Lost, he was known for Oz. Okay, this is not a nobody actor. And it was their reaction to him saying he wanted to leave the show and had to leave the show. Adewale Ekenoye Agbaje, I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing that right, I'm trying. But, because I'd use the French pronunciation, but I don't think but anyway, just the torrent of racist stuff that they were saying, and it isn't that it's racist. Yes, indirectly it's racist. He's trying to think of something mean to say. And it's almost it's amateurish that the guy couldn't think of a better insult than some cues. Comes off as a real jackass. Could not think of a better way to insult someone than this. Multiple people said he flew into a rage, saying that he would write off Mr. Echo by having him lynched from a tree. And all the racist undertones, and at great length and in considerable variation of, we're going to find him strung up in a tree with his dick cut off and in his mouth, all these things on with him in a tree, strung up in a tree, because he was trying to think of the most offensive thing he could say, which he could because there's no oversight. Milgram experiment, it's not the racism in and of itself. It's whatever you could think of as the most ugly thing to say. And even the people around him, and there were multiple reports he went on rants like this, said, I honestly, read the article, but I honestly don't think he meant that seriously, or I can't tell if he was seriously planning to do that, like as a planned course of action, or if this was just him in a burst of rage making insults. Did he seriously plan to, everyone says he said that in an outburst? Did he carry out serious... they haven't seen anyone who saw him seriously proposing that. So I'm inclined to think it was just an insult, but something that offensive on a personal... He took everything personally for, I have a job thing, I have another offer, I have to leave the show. And just how vindictive they were. And this is just for someone who had to leave the show. Don't even... The core is the third point and final point I'm getting to. And it says in the article, never challenge the people in charge. And there's no oversight over them. They're right all the time. So, this goes back to, like, fucking Plato, man. The Republic, which I read in college, that... The whole point where Socrates and the interlocutors are arguing that, justice is the powerful dominating the weak. And then Socrates, using Socratic argument method, goes to the other guy, this wolfish man who's saying, power is I can dominate anyone. Are you omniscient and are you infallible? And he goes, well, admittedly, no. Sometimes I make mistakes. So if you tell people to follow your orders without question, as an extension of your will, that sometimes you make mistakes, they will be carrying out mistakes. Why, yes. So by surrounding yourself with yes men who blindly follow your every order, no matter how ridiculous, aren't you just driving yourself off a cliff? Like Cersei in Book 4 of Song of Ice and Fire, basically. And the beauty of that this guy who's this raving tyrant went, oh shit, it isn't in my good interest to be surrounded by yes men who I've tyrannized into submission. Using Socratic method, that always struck me as beautiful. But that's a thing when you have malignant narcissists like Book Cersei, that they are going to implode eventually. It's just how many people they damage around them. So we've said that there's just this insult culture in general. And my point is, just as she's saying Lost wasn't even normal for its time, this was the worst of the worst, but it was in that context of why would people even let it pass? Well, other shows are like, this is just really bad, even relative to them. Game of Thrones was as bad to Lost as Lost was to other shows. The behind-the-scenes experience that you have an idiot with no writer's room who has never worked in television before. And this is just the story decision. They're talking about, like, what about when directors and set builders are going over, like, logistics with him, and he doesn't know what he's talking about, and he says, we can do that in 2 weeks instead of 6 weeks. And if they say, no, that's mathematically impossible, his answer will be to bully and tyrannize them, rather than address reality. Like that Chernobyl thing, there is no graphite on the ground, there is no graphite on the ground. Like, this isn't, like, a creative choice. I am the set builder. I am the horse wrangler. You can't do that. That it's any time you reveal his ignorance, which is all the effing time. Benioff will have petty revenge on people. This is what Maureen Ryan's book is about, that this is a system in place, that the studios chose to have celebrity showrunners on a pedestal who are above criticism with no oversight. I know I'm rambling. I didn't plan this. I'm just heads up, read this thing. I'm looking forward to your comments more than mine here. The recognition of Benioff didn't happen in a vacuum, and they were trying to make a new Lindelof, but everything I've said up to this point, I know I'm 20 minutes in, is mere preamble to point 3. Okay, so point 1 is there was a toxic culture in general. Point 2 is just an actor leaving the show. They wanted to humiliate him vicariously through his character. Not even in I'm going to, like a rational person going, I'm going to ruin his character so the actor doesn't get to get good roles after this. I can see the logic behind that. This is, you're vicariously going to string him up from a tree by having his character killed like that? I don't, like when Joss Whedon was doing the Justice League thing, and it was horrible hearing how he would bellow threats at people like Gal Gadot, do what the F I tell you, or I will rewrite your character to be so annoying people hate you. And even that, there's almost a warped logic to that of I will ruin your career by vicariously getting revenge on your character. And how many times in Game of Thrones did we see characters acting stupid or little petty comments where we wondered, is this the result of some behind-the-scenes disagreement this actor is having with Benioff? We don't know. But of the ones we do know, that was just an actor who needed to leave the show isn't exactly the same thing as challenging someone. Third point is, and this is actually the beginning of the article, it's what hooked me in. The actor who played Michael butted heads with the writers, and he got written off after season 2. I didn't watch Lost all the end. I watched season 1. That if you haven't watched it, there's this black father-son duo, Michael and Walt, right? And the Michael actor kept getting into arguments with the showrunners, specifically about, you promised this was an ensemble show, and now it's just focusing on the core of Jake, Kate, and Sawyer, and sometimes Locke. What they did after season 1 of Lost is they self-consciously instituted a tier-based pay grade system. That they officially defined who the core characters were by what pay level they were getting, that this is the Jack, Kate, Sawyer, and Locke show. When season 1 was written as an ensemble, season 2 onward, they weren't treating it like that. And this was in print. And as the Vanity Fair article points out, this is in contrast to how, 10 years before that, the NBC show Friends had a similar issue with creative control and money and stuff, but the actors put up a united front that they all wanted to be in the same pay grade, and they won. On Lost, that didn't happen. They instituted tiers of the haves and the have-nots, basically. And if you're getting paid more, they're going to get their money's worth out of you. That the ones who are being paid more get more scenes. And if you're stuck in the lower tier, who are you to ask for more character development? These aren't your stories that are being told. Now, obviously, the article goes into a lot of speculation on the racism or gender stuff of this. It certainly didn't help, and it even admits they might not have done this intentionally, but it's still like you're ignoring that none of the core characters, like Michael and Walt, are being sidelined. So Harold Perrineau would, the actor for Michael, would butt heads with them a lot, and grudgingly there was no choice that, look, you're a secondary character on this show now. But at first it was just, who doesn't ask for more storylines? The point that the writers refuse to acknowledge is taking at a given that he's now a secondary character. You aren't even writing this well as a secondary character. Or like guest characters are more coherent than this. The hyperfixation on, let's be honest, the core characters who can win Emmy Awards. That is why, and they have the audacity to go in the article, that's just how storytelling works. You want core celebrities to build up, like 3 or 4 people at most, as the front runners at the Emmy Awards. That's why they do this. And Ryan's book is about this. This has happened more than once in other shows. Game of Thrones, it was just, the media should have been raising alarm bells when Season 5 instituted a pay grade system and defined these are the core characters, everyone else is just a side character. But all this is leading up to specifically why Perrineau left the show. Back on Lost. At the end of Season 2, it's like, I'm not going to go into detail, but it's like they're stuck on it. There's a boat that explodes. They're stuck on a raft afterward. And Michael is separated from his son, Walt. So he's stuck on a raft with a couple other characters and Sawyer, and Walt is nowhere to be found. And in the original script version, he doesn't say a line of dialogue worrying about where Walt is. He doesn't mention his son at all. After, oh my god, Walt is taken, he's gone. There's a scene of Sawyer talking about his past, and Michael is just intently, asking how Sawyer is doing, stuff on his thing, and just reading it on the page, that is weird. I mean, even if these were two white characters, but it's just weird that writing doesn't work like that. That is bad writing. And I think the problem is you never correct the showrunners. That the rule is go along with their mistakes, and if you point out the mistake to try to get them to smooth it out, they'll only do it worse. Out of spite. So, he would ad-lib during takes a line or two about, oh, where's Walt? We have to figure out what Walt... Oh my god, where's my boy? Something. And the other actors, I don't know if they were on his side or not, because, well, we're tier A and you're not, but he's a father, not that he is such a secondary character who they are not thinking of him as a construct, as a fictional construct, that it's not just the personal, it's in the art of writing. This is not a coherent character. You have failed to write a coherent secondary character. That he wouldn't even be worrying about his son, and when he points it out, you got mad at him. So eventually they did some basic rewrites to put that in, and then they wrote him out of the show. Michael. And from their point, it almost makes sense in a warped way. They said, look, you argued with us, give me more to do or I leave. Well, we're not planning to give you more, so we're giving you the option to leave and pursue other career options rather than be tied to being a secondary character here. But still, I wanted you to write my characters more than a secondary character, and as more as this is just, it feels like the dream logic we saw on Game of Thrones, where everything was focused on what the core 5 characters were doing, Season 5 onward. To the point that the logic of other characters fell through the gaps, like what the hell is Ilaria Sand doing? Makes no internal sense. What Littlefinger is doing makes no internal coherent sense. It exists to prod the 5 main characters, cast members, into what they're doing. So when you institute a pay grade system like that they did this on Lost, you saw what happened with it, with Michael even fighting against, the Michael actor fighting against, I might not be the top tier, but you should have my character worry about his missing son. And they fired him for that, because, well, you're not the core. So all this time up to this in the video, I'm talking about there's the in-group and the out-group in the writer's room. Among the cast, there was a legally, financially defined who are the people that matter and the people that don't. And think of the big thing is, we knew when Season 5 hit that there was some rumbling about that they're restructuring. There's a pay grade system now. They called it Tier A. That Tier A, and they are generally the main characters in the books, don't get me wrong. They are leading by number of POV chapters. There's Kit Harington as Jon Snow, Emilia Clarke as Daenerys, and then the Lannister trio, the Lannister siblings of Peter Dinklage, Lena Headey, and Nikolai Coster-Waldau. Odd thing is that they never included Sophie Turner or Maisie Williams in that. I think that was purely due to their age, because they were still, showing off Arya all the time at the expense of other storylines. I think it was an age thing. You think, oh, they're writing out Sansa with the Sansa rape. No, if they were writing her out, they would have given her a year off like Bran. That was showing... It's weird that people have to get this through their head, and I keep saying it was a revelation to me when I realized they are pandering the actors for awards. The Sansa rape happened because they wanted to get... They said, oh, this rape will be wasted on a minor character. This is meaty material that Sophie will win an Emmy for if she acts the hell out of it. Let's reconceive the role to make it worthy of the actor's talents by giving the rape scene to her. When that makes no sense. So it's just... seasons 5 through 8 are a sizzle reel of actors chewing scenery or making epic brooding face because they think that's emoting, is showing them off. That's why so much of the show became centered around those 5, maybe 7 characters. And everything else just fell by the wayside. And how dare you tell me, well, that's how the story... No, you didn't plan this out. As you do, the condensation is a thing that needs to happen, but storylines you introduced in earlier seasons that you dropped like a brick because you didn't want to do them anymore. And it wasn't even for, well, we're showing off... They wanted to show off the actors because Emmy wins would boost the showrunner's own prestige, so they could more easily jump ship to make Star Wars movies. They have said this in interviews. That bullshit interview in that Fire Can I Kill a Dragon book with Hibbard, where they actually swore him to secrecy that on the filming of Season 3, they told Hibbard, as early as the filming of Season 3, this is 2012, we are not planning to do 10 seasons, or 8. We are planning to finish with Season 6, and then make a pair of theatrical movies, which are mostly action scenes, to launch our movie careers. Like, in as many words, that's what they were trying to do. That'll be a whole video unto itself. But they weren't even, like, Lindelof was possessive of this, and look, didn't Lindelof care about his own story that he had started? Like, suddenly Michael and all these other characters are getting marginalized, that they exist as props for the core tier A people. Think about how many other things got marginalized. Season 5 onward, well, you're not tier A. Remember when they killed off all the Tyrells in one fell swoop, blowing up the Great Sept? And thankfully, like, Free Folk, Reddit, and other people have memed this, that there are actual memes going around of, remember when we all thought that was really cool, but then the next season realized it was just them sweeping away storylines they didn't want to keep doing anymore? That Loras Tyrell got completely swept away, the only gay man on the show, so that's representation there. Marjorie Tyrell, all these other that they didn't want to deal with, that the Sparrows won't go away if their leadership is cut off in the capital city. The Stannis storyline in Season 5, well, you're not tier A. Shireen burning, with Davos is now just a prop for Kit Harington. He doesn't have his own story because, well, Kit's tier A. Dorne, utterly rewritten, treated bizarrely as Benioff just, was this a joke or something to you? Is it something you wrote on a napkin? They were trying, as much as I can tell, they were trying to show off Indira Varma, because they're such posers that when they were rewatching HBO's Rome endlessly, and hoping to be the next HBO's Rome with their show, they went, oh man, if we can get Rome veterans on this. Like, even Kieran Hines, who's a good actor, isn't really Mance Raider, but they put him in because, damn it, we want to be the next big HBO show. We will hire other people as stunt casting. And, well, we hired Indira Varma as Ilaria Sand, but she isn't a bigger character. We'll make her one. They consider this showing them off, but just storylines that withered, like Samwell and Gilly. Brienne of Tarth, not tier A, so her storylines don't matter. Even Alfie Allen as Theon Greyjoy was basically a prop for Sophie Turner rather than his own thing. And for that, I point to the final Emmy Awards. It is all, the tier A thing isn't just about pay, it's about the Emmy Awards. That they actually... Tier A, including Maisie and Sophie, are the only ones they ever put up for Emmy Awards. And during the Season 8 Emmys, it was that awkward elephant in the room people didn't want to talk about. That 3 actors self-submitted because HBO wouldn't promote them. That HBO said, we are only promoting the Tier A people for awards to focus on who will win. And these other actors felt like, you have no loyalty to us, or totally shafted. Well, you're not Tier A, you don't matter. 3 of them self-submitted and actually managed to get in the final round at the award ceremony, which is unusual. It's not unknown to happen, but it's rare. Those 3 actors were Alfie Allen for Best Supporting Actor, self-submitted because HBO wouldn't support him. Gwendolyn Christie for Best Supporting Actress. And even Charisse Van Houten as Melisandre for Guest Actress. That if you're looking for evidence of the tiers and how that affects storytelling and how characters they want to develop or not develop, like Theon and Brienne, what were they doing from season 7 onwards? What were they doing in season 7? What were they doing in season 7? And people just trail off and go, look at the action scenes. Look at that cool shot of Kit making a brooding face as he's standing in front of the whites. Look at Emilia making that cool face as there's this battle scene from the Dragonback. The tier system is linked to Emmy pandering. And you saw this happening on the show. Other ones I'm thinking of, remember how marginalized Littlefinger and Varys were? The Varys, the look on that actor's face in the when they're reading the script read, or how marginalized Littlefinger is the architect of the War of the Five Kings, and he sort of just trails off and doesn't do anything season 5 onward. They were not prioritizing this. What affects me the most is the realization from this article that Perrineau points out they encouraged division among the actors with the pay grade system. That it wasn't just, we are focusing on the tier A's for storytelling. It's like when Friends put up a united front and won, and they didn't. Who is going to protest changes to your storyline? That you're not putting up a united front. That suddenly when you have, well, you're tier A and you're not, who is going to complain about you ruined Varys? Or your Brienne isn't doing anything? That there were haves and have-nots, so instead of a united front, I don't know if Kit Harington and Emilia knew about this. They actually seem to be silently suffering from all of this. Or at the very least, by season 8, if they were in a bubble for 3 years, I don't blame them given how much they were hurt by, like, when you see that table read for season 8, that Kit walked in, he hadn't read, he said, as an artist, I want to read it cold, and he was devastated. And I wonder what was going on in his head. What was a thought in Kit's head? I want you to tell me this in the comments. I should have spoken out when they ruined Dorne. I should have spoken out about the Sansa rape. I should have spoken out when they ruined Stannis. Like, what was going on in his head? Because this is a man he had been making excuses for. I know this because I was making excuses for Benioff and Weiss through season 4, because I wanted to like the show. But when when the Taisha reveal didn't happen at the end of season 4, I started going, what the hell is going on here? These aren't just condensations for the needs of television. So a lot of my hatred is I spent a lot of time defending them and then realized I was completely conned. So I would sympathize. How would Kit know? There were other things he saw. We weren't there. We can only speculate. Or like Emilia Clarke saying that she'd read the script in advance and just was in such a haze that this is not anything you were even hinting at in scene directions, that she just walked around in a haze for hours. Were the tier A people that isolated from it? We will never know. But a lasting thought, tying in with the article of just, well, you're not tier A, it's the circular logic that people would apply of, well, they didn't know the term tier A, that's the term they used, but, well, look, this is a story about Daenerys and Jon Snow. They're the people up for Best Actor nominations. So if Stannis is getting cut, if Dorne is getting cut, it must not matter. That if this character was important enough to be considered tier A, Benioff would have declared them tier A. Is circular logic. Their whole point is he is wrong to say they're not important, to institute a caste system almost of these are the ones we're focusing on for awards. And I know the article talks about with the loss of the look, at best this was unintentionally racist because I'm the only black character on the show and you're marginalizing me. But it would be interesting if at something like that bullshit Con of Thrones, which is a promotional event for the Love Fest or Benioff and Weiss they put together, if you went up at a panel, and tell me if someone would have the audacity to go up at a panel and say, look, they had to kill, I'm sorry they killed off Missandei, but she wasn't a tier A character. Think about that it's not, and the whole complaint, like the Michael actor, it's not just that I'm not getting a lot to do. I even kind of understand I'm a secondary character now. And I wasn't expecting Grey Worm or Missandei to be affecting geopolitics. But you treated Missandei as a prop in Daenerys' storyline. Because when you institute a tier system that it's all about tier A, that just as he was saying he was on the raft with Sawyer, only asking how Sawyer was feeling and not, my character should be asking where his missing son is? Well, I didn't think about that, and how dare you correct me? I remember the backlash from a lot of the black fan base going, even I, as a white man, you stupidly killed off Missandei as this utter fridging moment, like it's the the evil witch is killing off someone just to goad the hero. Is this supposed to be fueling a story arc for Daenerys burning a city? This is contrived and won't happen in the books. Do you seriously think this specific incident will be doing that? Regardless, they weren't even thinking about what is this for Missandei's storyline. And the people pointing out she ends up as a chained prisoner, randomly killed off. The plot mechanics of how she gets captured are gibberish, that they wanted it to happen. I hate when people go, oh, well, Rickon would have lived if only he zigzagged. He is a fictional character. He didn't zigzag because they wanted him to die. The writers. These aren't real people. I'm criticizing writing decisions. So, well, it's just blind luck Missandei got captured. You are the one who decided she'd be captured and worked backwards. So tell me in the comments the comparisons between what happened to Michael and what happened to Missandei. That's a big one. We have like 30 characters who are technically starring cast, but you're not tier A. So I didn't even think about what your story arc was. So it was so weird when they couldn't figure out how to put the puzzle pieces back together at the end of season 8, that, these are characters we didn't develop. Like Brienne, Jaime went away, I guess I become a Kingsguard, or other random shit. Bran, a character they decided wasn't tier A, and who I'm pretty sure won't be King of Westeros in the books, because we think that he'll be King of Winterfell because he's Robb's brother. We think the Iron Throne will be destroyed at the end of the books. That's why they kept contradicting themselves, saying, well, the throne is destroyed, and then Bran is king. Wait, so his chair is destroyed, but the institution of the monarchy is still... What? We think they're going to break... The Seven Kingdoms will break up, and he'll be king of the North, which is fine in terms of plot mechanics. And that Sansa will be queen of the Vale, and these are not the same any more than... It's so weird. They got the fan base indoctrinated in that mindscape of tier A as well. Compartmentalization is what it is. What is a lot of the source of my rage is when people say, look, would you say this in live action at a panel? I have no idea. People go, look, the Sansa rape did happen in the books, just happened to a different character. I am not talking about the physical mechanics of a rape scene which weren't on screen in either book or show, but that this is ruining Sansa's storyline. And you really don't care and see it as interchangeable because they're not tier A. And the same people the double think to turn around and say, but it only got ruined by season 8 when Arya killed the Night King instead of Jon Snow. What, suddenly storylines aren't interchangeable? I don't think there is a Night King in the books. I think they made him up to be a generic evil overlord, but the same people turning around and going, well, you can't mix and match storylines between tier A, but people below tier A don't matter, do whatever. And I don't want to bring... The race and gender stuff the article goes into just highlights how much they didn't care about the second-tier people. They did this to, white male characters, too, that just characters falling by the wayside. I'm brimming with rage at things they did to Littlefinger and Varys. Just the look on that actor's face, he's older than the younger one. He knows this is bullshit. So... This has been just a podcast. I don't have time to... I will be referring back to this article multiple times, and I'm going to get this book. Because these were systemic problems, and my whole thing is, it's not revenge on Benioff, it's revenge on exposing the people who enabled him. Like, in Elizabeth Holmes terms, it's not just, we have to get Elizabeth Holmes arrested. It's, who are the people who didn't do their job that this person managed to fall through the cracks? Like the FDA and medical people who should have certified whether this was working or not. That there were people who were in charge of checking for specifically these problems and didn't. That the news media is the biggest enemy. Not the news media, I'm like the professional critics, the hype reporters at new media, Valter-style recapper sites who are, you didn't even ask these questions. You just hyped it up because you're not blind hype that you don't even know how to review a TV show in terms of cinematography and stuff, and bought into the cult of Benioff, eerily similar to the cult of Lindelof 10 years before. They wanted to make a knockoff Lindelof, and they got one. In the sense that it's this cheap imitation who, unlike Lindelof, doesn't know how screenwriting works, thinks it's about the faces, doesn't know how logistics works. Everyone was playing follow the leader, trying to make a new celebrity showrunner to put on a pedestal. And just how much that mentality of, like, doing the late night talk shows and just the showrunner is himself a celebrity is weird. Other shows don't do that nearly as much as some of the other ones, like Succession, not as much. Vince Gilligan was popular, but he was not, the toast of the town like that. But that's this, we've seen that dying now that the pandemic is dying, that they used to throw out these 100 million, there was a point in the past 10 years where there's this boom in the idea of the celebrity showrunner, and they'd be giving them like $200 contracts for 5 years. Now, Shonda Rhimes is a big producer, Murphy, all these other things, don't get me wrong, they're actually good at it. But the shit that Netflix bought Benioff and Weiss because they wanted their Lindelof, and they were left holding the bag. So I've been rambling about this for a while. I do not have time to review this well. But if you've been listening to my channel, read this article, and it is eerily similar. That this didn't happen in isolation. They are doing the same things. The effect that a tier system has on storytelling. That okay, if this is going to be like Dunk and Egg, it basically has 2 major recurring characters. That would fit that show reasonably well. But why did you start it as an ensemble show and only later shoehorn it into that other system? So, what's the quote here? Let me end with this quote from Vanity Fair, that these revelations explain a lot, and this applies to Lost and to Game of Thrones, the first half versus the second half, that Martin wanted this world sprawling, there's multiple POVs, it's not just 3 core characters, and they shoehorned it into a generic Dungeons & Dragons action campaign. This exact quote from Vanity Fair could apply equally to both shows. Quote, these revelations explain a lot, namely, why a show promising an inclusive globe-trotting adventure with an ensemble cast ended up being, in its final season, about a small group of men on interlocking epic quests. This generic, we're going to go back to old tropes. There's the chosen one, the epic quest, and the same thing happened. I'm going to talk more about this on a scale of months, but you need to read this.